G'day all, welcome back to Built by Chris. In this episode I'm going to be making my new workbench. I've salvaged some fairly decent pieces of pine to make it with. They're very heavy, they're thick. Some of them got a little bit of a twist to them, but once I knock it all down, once I start milling the pieces up, I'll be able to straighten them all up. But anyway, this is my workbench. I'm going to be making this in parts. I don't know how many parts just yet. I'm guessing probably about 4 to make the whole bench, so I just don't want to make the videos too long, and we'll see how we go from there. So if you want to see how I make this bench, follow me and I'll show you how easy it is. Right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rip these or cut these boards down to a more manageable size. These things are heavy and I'm not as young as I used to be, so I'm just going to cut these down. This is going to be the top of the workbench. Now they're going to be 55 millimeters or 5.5 centimeters thick for the top, which means I'll get 3 across out of this board, and then I'll plane them all down. So the first thing I'm going to do is just cut them down to, they're going to be 1.6 meters long too, by the way. So I'm just going to cut that down to a more manageable size, a little bit oversized so I can mill it down properly later on. But let's get that first cut going. Bit of waste. I'll be able to use that for something. Right, so what I've got here now is all the pieces of my workbench cut up into manageable pieces. They're all very, very rough lengths. They're ready to go to my next stage of the milling process. And as far as waste is concerned, out of all of this, this is what I got left in waste. Which is bugger all really when you think about it. There's not much there, but I could probably use these if I need as filler blocks or little bits and pieces like that. And so they definitely won't go to waste. But that's all I got left from that pile of wood, or that pile of rough lumber that I had. So my next step now is I'm going to concentrate on the top, because that's going to require the most work, because I've got to mill it down and I've got to glue it all up together. And then I've got to flatten it, getting it ready. So away we go with the next step. Now my jointer is only a little benchtop jointer, so it's not really going to work for these long pieces. And I can't run them through my table saw because I don't have a straight edge to reference against. But what I do have is my track saw. So what I can do is actually rip a piece off here that gives me a nice straight edge that I can then reference off my fence, and then I can cut my other pieces off. That's the only way that I can see around this. If I had a jointer bed that was long enough to take these, then I'd obviously be going that route, but I don't. This is the only way that I see that'll give me a nice straight edge to run against my fence and make some fairly decent cuts, or fairly accurate cuts. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so there's the piece ripped off. Move this out the way. Move my track out the way. And there I have a nice straight cut. And it's actually a pretty decent cut coming off that track saw. So now I definitely have a straight edge that I can run against my fence, and I can rip down the boards for my tabletop. So I'll go ahead and I'll do the rest of those. Okay, next step in this process is now I'm going to rip these boards down to the thickness I want of the tabletop. Now my tabletop's only going to be about 50 mil, 55 mil. I'm not going to be doing a lot of pounding on it or anything like that. But I still think that 55 mil is going to be more than enough to take the sort of abuse that I'm going to dish out to it. A lot of the purists might say that that's not quite thick enough, but hey, again, it's a small table for me. It's basically only going to be just an assembly table. I'm not going to be pounding on it, or I'm not going to be planing or anything like that with it. So I think it'll do me. Plus, if I made them any bigger, then I wouldn't have enough material to make the whole bench with. So I'm sort of sacrificing one for another. Whether that's the right thing to do, I'm not sure, but I'm sure it's going to work for me. So let me rip these down to the thickness that I need. I've already set my table saw up. I'm cutting slightly bigger than what the eventual top's going to be, and that's just so I can allow for a little bit of planing, because I'm going to run it through the thickness planer, and then get it down to the thickness that I want. So it's set to about 58, 59 mil, and I'll run it through and get a couple of boards cut. Okay, so there's my 3 boards ripped out of that one piece. And there we go. All I've got to do now is rip the rest of them down for the rest of the top. So let's get on with it. Okay, I've ripped all the boards down that's going to make up the top. I've got my little jointer out, and all I'm going to do is just face plane one side. So that when I put them through the thicknesser, I'll have somewhere to reference off. Otherwise, I've got to shim it up under the board and everything, and that's a pain in the bum. So I'm just going to run a few of these through. Just take off, because there's a like a grooved edge on it, or I don't know, some sort of face on it. I'm just going to make it nice and smooth, and then go for the next step. So let's get on with this. One thing I forgot to do is put on my earmuffs. That's better. Always wear your earmuffs. All right, well, I've put all the pieces through the jointer. They're all been jointed. There's 2 faces that have been jointed, and they're 90 degrees to one another. So now it's time to put it through my thickness planer. I've just gone through and put brand new blades in it, and I'll start running the timber through that for the next step. Okay, all my boards are planed down. They're all fairly level. I'm going to glue it up in 2 lots so I can put it back through the thicknesser when I'm done. But I'm going to do them one at a time, because it's a fairly hot day here today, and I'm worried that this glue is going to go off too quick on me. So I've got all my clamps set up underneath. I've got a bunch of clamps that I'm going to clamp across the top. I've got some cawls, which are just pieces of timber with packing tape on them, so I can clamp it down, and the masking tape just stops it from gluing up these onto there as well. So best I shut up and get on with this glue up. All right, I've only glued up half the table because it's really hot in here, and the glue was going off. So I thought I'll clamp that up as much as I can. I'll come back in a couple of hours, and I'll do the other half, because it's just too hot. I think I got that one nice and flat. I got the cawls in. They're looking nice and flat. Yep, everything's looking good. All right, I'll come back to this in a couple of hours and glue up the other half. Maybe a little bit too much glue. Right, with the exception of a tiny weeny little lip here, the top is glued up. I'm just going to probably sand it down. I won't need to hit it with a plane or anything because the lip is, it's almost not there. So, very happy with the way the top come out. I'm just going to give it a light sand with a belt sander. Going to lop off the ends to square them up, and the top will be ready to go. The next thing I'm going to do is make the base for the new workbench, so I can fit this on. As you can see, the top of this workbench is a hell of a lot smaller than this workbench, and that's the whole idea behind this. This takes up a lot of room. Like I said, it's been a good workbench over the years, but being a two-car garage, I'm pressed for space, and this is probably going to do maybe not the same job as this one, but it's going to be a solid workbench anyway. So let's go on with the next part. I'll give this a light sand. I'll probably do that off camera because you've probably seen a billion people sanding stuff. I'll give it a light sand and then we'll start on the other base. Right, well that was the first part, making this bench top. Now as you can see, like I said before, this is a lot smaller than my previous one, and you can see that. It's going to be slightly shorter than the actual table saw. The bars on the Incra fence system, they're about 1.8 metres long. This is going to be about 1.6 metres long. The old bench is 2 metres wide, and that's just, it had its purpose, it had its use, but now it's too big. The width of it is going to be just under 600 mil, whereas the old one was 1100 mil wide. And again, had its purpose, had its use, but it's just too big. So this is the top. I've gone through and I've sanded it. I did all that off camera because sanding is boring, let's face it. And I've got to tell you, it weighs, it's a fair weight. I was worried about, because it's made out of pine, I was worried that it wasn't going to be heavy enough, but once I build the base, I think this thing's going to weigh a ton, so it'll suit my needs. One of the other things I'm going to do is I'm going to drill the dog holes in it, and I'm going to use the UJK path guide system because it works so well on the other one. So I'm going to use it on this one as well, and that'll be, I suppose, another video. But there it is. That's the top all glued up, ready to go. The next part of this video is going to be the base. Now it's not going to be anything like Cuffy's. If you want to check out Cuffy's workbench, it's not going to be anything like that because the guy's a master, and I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. You know, I do what looks good and what fits together. I'll probably end up using dominoes and all sorts of manner of fasteners. But it's going to be a fairly sturdy bench anyway. So, with having said all that, thanks for watching this video. Stay tuned for part 2, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Bye for now.